Um, I'm not the radio professional like Gavin, so we're not. We're just gonna go kind of more of a cold open tonight, everyone. With the welcome to the round three Western Conference Finals preview of Spits and Suds for the Dallas Stars versus the Edmonton Oilers. I am Sean Shapiro. Normally, Gavin waxes poetically here in this space, and we have a good time and laugh about it. And tonight, I will wax poetically, joined by Robert Tiffin, who I love Robert's site. You should go read it. Really brings a nice, interesting, unique voice and coverage to Starsland. So go read Robert's stuff if you don't already. And yeah, this is why I write for a living and I don't host podcasts for a living. It's just a side gig. So hey, Robert, how you been?
Yeah, pretty good, man. Yeah, it's a lot harder when the movie director's not giving you the lines to read, huh?
I know. I need that. I got the two screens up. I got the teleprompter. Really, I know nothing. I'm just. You ever see that old Bob McKenzie bit where it's where it's actually Bob's wife who's actually the insider and Bob knows nothing at all?
Yeah.
That is that's really what it is. I know nothing. It's actually my dogs who are actually the knowledgeable hockey ones. I'm just a human puppet. So
you just got to strap on some goalie pads and all your instincts will kick in and you'll be deflecting questions left and right.
Exactly. So, okay. I want to start with this topic here. Stars Oilers. It's very in vogue right now to see national media stories about how the Oilers have been hot for 6 months and they won a game 7 and obviously there's a little bit of juice to the 31 years since Canada's won a cup, which I think obviously adds to the Canadian push, and for some reason we seem to have this ongoing argument of which team is the most Canadian, which is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen when it happens to be their second best player is German. All of that being said, this is the easy, in my mind, I look at this and I wrote about it today. This is the easiest series the Stars have had so far. I think Vegas and Colorado were a much tougher series. I think it's been a gauntlet. I mean, Stars were the first team since the expansion era, since '67, to beat the last two Stanley Cup champions. And then you get Edmonton, and Edmonton does have the best player in the world, call it what it is. But I'm not buying the hype that this is a close worry about the Oilers series as much as it seems to be the vogue national place. I mean, am I crazy, Robert? Like, tell me, give me your thoughts on this here.
Well, I mean, you have to look at how they got here, right? I mean, Edmonton, no shade to LA and even to Vancouver, but no one was spending this whole year saying, "Oh, the Pacific Division is the gauntlet of the NHL." Right? There's just no way around that, and I think Edmonton's. I mean, you look at a lot of their numbers, and it kind of shows you that, right? They didn't have to do what Dallas did to get to where they are because they could do what they always do, right? They could capitalize in the power play. They could have poor goaltending, and it wasn't really costing them. They could get through 2 rounds, and they got pushed to 7 games by Vancouver, which they probably shouldn't have, really, when you look at how poorly Vancouver did in a lot of areas. But it's hard to say. I mean, we all know exactly what Dallas went through to get to where they are, and even though Edmonton did it in only 12 games instead of 13, it's hard not to say that Edmonton really, if they're really so good that they should be scaring the Stars, they shouldn't have done it much more quickly.
Yeah, I mean, when we were talking about the playoff bracket, one of the gifts to the Pacific Division teams was Vegas dropping to the second wild card and moving to the Central, right? That's one of the Pacific. This would have been. I remember saying to people before, this is. I honestly believe if Vegas had not choked it away against the Ducks in Game 81 or 82, whatever it was, I believe we'd be previewing Dallas Vegas right now. I truly believe Vegas would have rolled through the Pacific, and it would have been a very scary Vegas team because they would have Thomas Hertl and Eichel and Stone and everyone would have been able to get on the same page. Dallas took them out before anyone else could. And it still took 7 games, right? That's like, to me, like, it's
absolutely. It's one of those things. Well, it's one of those things. I mean, you've said it before with you and Gavin that like once Vegas gets rolling, that's when they get scariest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Dallas was deep enough to rebound from even, and I think their depth too isn't just like a, 4 lines, 3 defensive pairs sort of thing. It's also mentally as well.
Yeah.
When you have that mentality, like Dallas just today released a clip of DeBoer, I think it must have been in one of the intermissions or even the overtime intermission in game 6, where he's talking about, okay, boys, let's go. Let's roll 4 lines. Like he specifically mentions everyone's on board, which I guess is, he can actually say that when he had a 6th defenseman he wanted to play. But yes. He said it, and you can tell that bled into the lineup because he meant it. And they knew it was really all hands on deck. And whether it's Radek Faksa scoring against Vegas in game 7, or whether it's Sam Steele coming up with a clutch play at some point, you see that depth in a lot of different ways. And I have to think that Dallas is far more prepared at this point because of what they've been through, whereas Vegas would have just steamrolled. I mean, certainly anything the Pacific can have. Can you imagine Edmonton bringing that goaltending up against Vegas? I mean, I don't see that lasting very long at all.
Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes people get so insulated in their own bubble, and they're looking for, when teams are good, you look for problems. And I think that's kind of one of the marks of a good team. The Rope Hintz injury, obviously it's notable. The Stars are a better team when Rope Hintz is healthy. If Edmonton lost a Rope Hintz level player on their depth chart, the team is in shambles. Just like, and we're talking about, oh man, does it hurt Dallas a little bit? Like to me, because here's the big thing. Edmonton doesn't even have a top 6 in my mind. Like I look at Edmonton and I look at it as a team that has a top 5 and someone who also has to play in the top 2 lines. And even worse, on nights where they have to, where they're struggling to get that going, and McDavid and Draisaitl get put together on the same line. And I think there's times where there are definitely like, hey, certain situational things, but when Knobloch puts them together, it becomes even more of a top-heavy team than the heaviest top-heavy Stars teams we've seen. Like this to me is the spot where everyone's like worries about, oh, McDavid, Draisaitl, everything like that. If they have to play on the same line in this series, the Stars will cook Edmonton, because it will be one line where Dallas will probably split the battle. Let's be honest, that McDavid and Draisaitl are going to get theirs, and then Dallas will just feast on the other 3 lines. Like I use this example today where, and Matthias Janmark's a lovely human, but
yes,
Matthias Janmark is playing for this team in the playoffs. And the reason Matthias Janmark was let go by Dallas and went kind of through a little bit of a journey in the desert was Dallas realized they needed a 4th line that actually could put the puck in the net. So when Edmonton is playing a guy like that shows you where they are. And it's, to me, this is just a, like, I don't want, it's kind of the thing where I'm trying to find, I'm the opposite right now, right? Where like people are like trying to find ways to be scared. I'm trying to somehow find a way to check myself more on this, because I don't like.
This is Janmark. He had like one knee for a couple of years.
Exactly. So like aside from Dallas's inability to win game 1s, like I don't know how you don't. I have a hard time. I don't pick sweeps because I don't think it happens. I think hockey's too random for that. I think but if this series goes past 5 games, I will be stunned. Like I truly will, and I'm not trying to be overconfident from a Dallas perspective. I have a hard time looking at the evidence in front of me and seeing how this Oilers team wins even 2 games against the Stars.
It actually reminds me a little bit of Dallas-Seattle last year, because you had some of the same narratives around Seattle last year that you have around Dallas this year, which is, depth, roll 4 lines, they're hard forechecking, all this stuff. And then Dallas came out a little bit flat in that first game. Also, Joe Pavelski scored 4 goals to send it to overtime, and they still dropped it. But that's like the best case scenario in a lot of ways for Edmonton, that they get 4 points from their top guys, which, given how Dallas has defended every team so far, they've played 2 fantastic teams they played so far this postseason. You're hard pressed to bet on Edmonton scoring 4 goals unless 3 of them are on the power play. And Dallas doesn't even give up that many power plays, relatively speaking. So finding a way, I think it really is. The more interesting question is, how does Edmonton find a way into this series realistically than looking for the problems for Dallas? Because it seems pretty cut and dried that Edmonton's weaknesses kind of play right into Dallas's strengths.
Yeah, and even if you get, like, even if McDavid has his McDavid night or Draisaitl has his just Draisaitl night, and they go off for a night or whatever, they have to do it 4 times. Yep. Like, and they may have to do it more than 4 times. That's the thing. Like, to me, it's I don't see how it happens through all of that, and it's. And you look at the Edmonton defense too, right? Like you look at the first pair. I like the Bouchard pair. Like I want to make sure I've got the lines up right now, their most recent lines, to make sure I have everything accurate as I'm talking about all of this. But like hold on, I don't have. So like I like Ekholm and Bouchard. That's a good pair.
Ekholm really changed them. When they got Ekholm a little while back, last year, whatever it was, it really did change them. They looked for a player like that, right? Adam Larson and all this stuff, and Ekholm was that sort of player, and has been really. He's a great player.
Yeah, but Nurse and Desharnais, right? Second pair, like that's not a good second pair. And we talk about the Stars being a 5 defenseman team. At least they are a solid top 4. They can play their top 4. If in Edmonton, this is a team where unless Ekholm and Bouchard are on the ice, I'm losing the matchup with my defenseman on the ice with this team. And I mean, it's to me,
how much would Edmonton pay?
A big difference in this series.
Yeah. How much would Edmonton pay to have an Alex Petrovic to play right now with Cody Cece's struggles and everything? They'd love a player like that.
Exactly. Right, yeah. Exactly. And so it's we're coming up confident how Dallas looks. And I just think it's one of those things where I'd like to think people know this about you and I, where we tend to look at things in a very open and honest view of this, right? Like, and so this is not rose-colored Stars glasses. This is just the reality of, I see the evidence in front of me that this is one team that is completely mismatched with the other. So let's play devil's advocate, though, okay?
Yeah.
How does Edmonton win this series? Because to me, there's a formula for Edmonton to win this series, but it takes 3 perfect things to happen. 1, you need a team that has only taken 26 penalties in 13 playoff games to all of a sudden start taking 4 penalties per game. You need Dallas to lose its discipline. Dallas has only taken 2 per game in 13 games. So you need that to happen.
And you need to figure out who's going to be drawing those penalties too, because other than the top line, who's going to be drawing those penalties? Dallas can match up against just about everyone else. So go ahead.
So let's assume Dallas loses their heads. That happens. Then on top of that, you need Stuart Skinner, to equal out Jake Ottinger's play. He doesn't have to be better than Jake Ottinger, but he has to even the scales. And that could be Stuart Skinner playing above and beyond. It could be Jake Ottinger faltering. It could be there's somewhere those scales have to meet. So you need that to happen. And number 4, you need McDavid and Draisaitl to not have an off night. That is the formula for Edmonton to win this series. And so there is a way for Edmonton to win this series, and it could happen. They're in the Western Conference Final, yada yada yada. It's fine, but as a Stars, if you're a Stars fan listening to this and you're watching this and you're looking at this, you should be very confident. And it's also the Stars also come into this with that. It's terribly cliched, but it's true. It's the classic, they've been here before. They know what it takes to win. We're not talking about a team that's like, oh, they haven't been there before. They've got to do it. Like they were in the Western Conference Final last year. They saw what happens when you drop the ball. They are a team that is playing for what I believe is Joe Pavelski's final. I believe we're seeing the final games of Joe Pavelski right now. I don't know. I want to be clear to anyone aggregating all that junk. I'm not reporting it. I believe that Joe Pavelski's final game will come with the final game of the Stars season this year. They're playing for that. They are playing for the legacy essentially of their captain in Jamie Benn. They are playing for all of this. This is a Stars team, and in Pete DeBoer too. Like this is there's so many things where I look at this where I don't see Dallas somehow unchecking all three of those boxes so Edmonton can win this series. So
there's so many ways, and there's so many ways it can go wrong for Edmonton. Whereas you have to come up with like one specific way in three different categories for it to go wrong for Dallas. Again, not to harp on it, but like mental depth. How quickly? I mean, we already saw Stu Skinner get benched right after just one kind of bad run in a couple of games, and it's not like he's been outstanding outside of that either. I mean, Vancouver almost came back in Game 7. Vancouver was not playing well at all. And Edmonton couldn't extend the lead because Shelovs was amazing, and they couldn't stave off a mild Vancouver comeback. I mean, it's not like all four lines for Vancouver were threatening them. It's Edmonton doesn't have the defensive fortitude that Dallas does either. So even if Edmonton does get a lead on them, how are they going to lock it down when Dallas really starts pressing?
Vancouver had a 5-shot comeback third period. Like, let's be clear about this. Like, they were down 3-0 and they scored twice on 5 shots. Like, it is. I mean, somehow and no matter which way you adjust the scales of this game, right? So, and it's, I think this series could go a couple different ways. It could go, there could be, if, say you have a high shot game, okay? I think that's the advantage to Dallas, because even if you're looking at Draisaitl and McDavid having a great night or whatever, okay, I expect a high shot game to favor the better goaltender and the team with more depth. If you have a low shot game, like, that's the other thing. Edmonton won the series, but Vancouver dictated how the series was played. Mm-hmm. And when, like, Vancouver needed to play games where they were 20-15 shot games and things like that. And that's what Vancouver did. If Dallas wants to slog and force Edmonton to be like, show us you can actually generate something, they could win a lot of games 3-1, 2-1, where Edmonton has nothing. And
Dallas is the most defensively stingy team in the playoffs, and like not even of the 4 remaining. They allow, like, at 5-on-5, they average like 1.5 goals allowed a game. It's nothing compared to, it's like half of what Edmonton allows. Dallas can absolutely lock games down and slow them down and win it because they know that they have the guys to do it. Whereas Edmonton has never shown that they can control a game; they can just ride a wave.
Yeah, and you know what? This is a Dallas team too that is actually going to be slightly healthier. We know the Hintz injury is going to be the Hintz injury is he's out. He's not going to play in Game 1. I have a hard time believing he'll. And once again, this is a feel, not he is officially day to day, but Yanni Hakanbach has been day to day for 70 days now. So it is. So Hintz's injury is notable, but the Stars having 5 days off in the playoffs is like gold. And to be able to get this, and on top of that, you mentioned the Petrovic coming back, and to me that's such a huge boost to this team as well, where now you have a space where you can play your 3 pairs normally, and you can roll things easily. And I look at this series as a heavy mismatch. Like, and at the same time, I've got Florida and New York up on the TV as we're talking about this. Like, meanwhile in the East, those teams are going to just hammer each other. You have teams that are just going at it right now. And one of the reasons, like, let's be clear, the reason ESPN picked the Eastern Conference Final this year, because they got the first pick of the networks. For those who don't know, there's a quote-unquote network draft for the conference final, and the team in the network that has the Stanley Cup final each year gets to pick which conference final they want. 99% of the time, you always pick the East because of the better TV times and the TV markets. And so the Rangers are the Rangers in the Eastern Conference Final is a ratings king for ESPN.
When you're worried about underarm sweat and odor, it can be distracting. Like this. Or this. Or even this. It's time to silence those distractions with a spray of powerful Dove Men Plus Care Antiperspirant. Featuring our 72-hour protection and soothing 1/4 moisturizing cream. Because when you forget about your underarms, you can focus on being unforgettable. Dove Men. Forgettable underarms, unforgettable you.
Spectrum Internet has enough speed to handle all your needs, so you can work, game, and stream with speeds up to a gig. Plus, Spectrum's advanced Wi-Fi provides enhanced security for all your connected devices. Get Spectrum Internet with fast and reliable speeds, starting at just $29.99 a month with a 2-year price guarantee. Visit spectrum.com/internet for you for full details. Offer subject to change, valid for qualified residential customers only. Restrictions apply.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
A Canadian does not help Turner or ESPN's ratings because those fans aren't in the United States.
Yep.
And add in on top of that, there's a legit fear that this is a quick series where the Eastern Conference series they think is going to go 6 or 7. So we are given lots of confidence to Stars fans, I think, where this goes. And it's not... I'm the guy who has picked against Dallas more often than anyone. Just be honest. Like at one point... I once had former Stars assistant coach John Stevens tell me that they used my picks. Little fun, unknown, semi-known story is the Stars coaching staff would put my picks up on the board in the 2020.
You were the bulletin board material. That's great. That's great.
So I was the bulletin board material because there was.
Oh
there
man!
So much...
First the Jim Lights thing, and now that man, you've made a lot of friends there.
I clearly have. So I have a lot of confidence in Dallas in this series, and I think Edmonton will have a game or two where people will overreact to something, and that will happen. That's the nature of how playoff series work. But the other thing I want to add, and then I want to get, because I'm trying to do my best, Gavin, making sure we get everything in. So I'm getting questions that people asked and everything. I'm going to get to that on Twitter. The other thing I want to bring up about Edmonton, and it's the reason that I believe Edmonton is such a dangerous regular season team. And I think they're a good playoff team, but I believe it is the thing. In the regular season, you have to understand how the schedule works. Coaches are playing 82 games. You're often playing 3 games a week. You have back-to-backs. You don't worry about the other team. The pre-scout for coaches for regular season, it's about an hour and a half and everything like that. We should just say scout because pre-scout is dumb, by the way. Yeah. Pre-scout, yeah. You don't need the word pre-scout on the word scout.
You don't really current scout. Yeah,
exactly. So you have... But the Oilers are such a dangerous team because in the regular season, you only worry about yourself. That's really the only thing you have time for. You may give a tweak or an adjustment or whatever, but you don't have the time to game plan around it in the regulars. And so when... No one is game planning for Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl. You are just, the fact is, okay, they're coming to town, play our game as best as possible, let's hold on and hope we survive. That's really the approach against the Oilers in the regular season. In the playoffs, and it's one of the reasons that you look at McDavid's career points and stats, and he cooks against everyone. Mm-hmm. In the playoffs, you basically only focus on the other team. And it is all punches and counter punches and everything like that. And, so all of a sudden it becomes, okay, we know the Stars literally, I think one of the reasons they went out and got Tanev was for this. I think Jack Eichel was actually the real driver of this. Seeing what Jack Eichel did to them in the Western Conference Final last year was the reason Jim Nill went and got Tanev. But it's for this matchup. It's so you can roll both pairs against Nathan McKinnon like you did in the last round, like you did against Eichel in Vegas, and now like you will against McDavid.
Yeah.
So
it also frees up Heiskanen to get deployed against their other defensive units and their other lines too, because he's not having to do primarily defensive duty. The other theory I have about that too with regular season Edmonton is when they rolled out to that terrible start and Jay Woodcroft got fired and everything, when are teams likely to be deepest? Probably at the start of the season when they're as healthy as they're going to be, right? And then the year goes on, players start getting checked out or injured. They start kind of getting into that mindset of, wow, we got 70 more of these games. So it makes sense a little bit that they'd be facing the deepest teams who could hit them on all 4 lines at the start of the season. So it's just a theory, not going to throw out a bunch of data to back it up or anything, but it wouldn't shock me if Dallas is very similar in a lot of ways to a lot of the teams Edmonton faced at the start of the season, and they have similar struggles.
Yeah. All right, let's do this. Let's get to these questions, or try to get to as many questions. I want to be clear. I'm not answering every single question. I'm not reading every username.
Oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Because I don't have the time nor the all of that. But so I'm going to attempt, and plus the Twitter algorithm or X or whatever you want to call it is awful. So who knows if these even came in order. So,
or if they're real people for that matter. So whatever.
Yes. So I will try to do my best on this. First question we got is, how concerned should we be about the foot speed issue of a pairing of Petrovic and Suter against Edmonton? And
everyone has a third defense pairing, and
exactly.
As we saw, coaches can hide their third defense pairing if they really, really need to. So, I at home, sure, Edmonton will occasionally get a shift against them with their top guys, but there's a reason that Pete DeBoer trusts them.
Well, and I would counter with how concerned, if I'm Edmonton, if I'm doing this show in Edmonton right now, what the hell are we doing with Kulak and Cody Ceci right now?
against any of the top 3 lines.
Against any of the top 3 lines. Even the Stars' 4th line. Like, the Stars' 4th line finds ways to, even if they're not behind the goals and everything like that. So, that's one way. This is not based on the series, but this is a fair question for someone. What similarities between play styles do you see for McKinnon and McDavid, and how is it kind of different defending against the two of them? And I think that's a good point, because we often hear about, in hockey, we hear about best players in the world, and McDavid and McKinnon are both always right in that conversation. They're going to be them and Kucherov should be them and Kucherov are, those two and Kucherov are the finalists for the Hart. Surprisingly, McDavid wasn't the finalist for the Pearson this year, which is, I think, may have been a little bit of player just feeling a bit of overdraw of everything with him. But to me, the big thing is, and I've written about this before, McKinnon to me is Mario Lemieux. McKinnon is the most physically gifted hockey player of my lifetime to watch, as far as when it comes to size and speed and everything like that. That to me is, that's McKinnon. McDavid is faster than McKinnon. McDavid is also not effectively a moose going down the highway. that to me is the biggest difference. And so I'd say McKinnon, like the way you watch McKinnon, it's not necessarily for what he's doing in that moment. It's the fact that he could do something else at any given moment. He can cut back crazy. He can cross over at high speeds. I mean, so can McDavid, obviously. But McKinnon can also do stuff from a standstill that you would never expect and hold you off because you think you have him contained and you absolutely don't. Whereas McDavid is a little bit more kinetic, probably because he has that speed. He knows he could beat anyone. He tends to keep the motor going a little bit more, whereas McKinnon isn't afraid to stop and double back and just get past you because he can. Yeah, and you kind of watch both of them in the offensive zone. It's interesting. McKinnon, they stop and start, almost seek a bit in the offensive zone, where McDavid, specifically on the power play, and this is one of the things that Dallas will obviously work to avoid by not taking penalties, is McDavid is effectively in orbit almost the entire power play, and it's very hard to keep up with his orbit. So it's from a Stars perspective, it is a challenge, of course. I think it's also the way your defense defended with their feet and worked their angles against in the first 2 rounds, to me, is just a sign of, I'm pretty confident that you can do the same against McDavid. I mean, it's just like McKinnon, where McKinnon had the one play where he made Tanev, when Tanev was on the ice in the 5-on-5 in the Colorado series, the Stars had a 3-1 edge in goals, and the only goal was the one where McKinnon made. You know what? That's going to happen at some point in the series. But it's once, it's twice, and that's it. The other, and I use, I want to give my pal Dmitry Filipovich credit for this, because he used this terminology talking about Gustav Forsling the other day, and he's actually a really good example, and Tanev is kind of similar, where what Tanev and Forsling are is they're the closest thing you have to a rim protector in basketball, and I want to give Dmitry credit for that, where it's the guy who changes how everyone else operates because of the aura he brings about, dang, I can't get to the paint.
Yep. Yeah, he takes away space in a very real way that's hard to do on the ice, especially against players like that.
Question about lines. I hate talking lines on, because I think I think lines are, I've used my line before about lines, where lines are like stray cats. You should only name them if you think they'll be around long enough.
Well, and I mean, DeBoer hasn't been afraid to mix them up a fair amount in the postseason, and it hasn't really. They can do a lot with the lines, so I wouldn't get too married to any combination at this point.
Yeah. Another development, I believe the Star, if worried about the Stars' bottom pairing, and I'm more worried about the Oilers' bottom pairing. Chris has a question here about will this be physical? Do you expect Dallas to minimize the amount of penalties taken? And I mean, it'll be physical. It'll be a playoff series, but it's, when you talk about, is it going to be more physical than Vegas? No. Is it going to be? It's not going to be, like, Colorado's a more physical team than people realize, right? Like Colorado hammers people. I mean, to me, this is you put it great before. Who else is going to draw penalties other than McDavid on this team?
Well, and it's the playoffs, so they might not even give him the calls.
Exactly. Yeah. Special teams. I'm sorry. I'm just making sure we answer questions that we have.
Well, and the other thing to say about that too, is people are acting as though more calls in a game are only going to benefit Edmonton, when we've seen that the refs want to try to keep it fairly even most of the time. At least most referees do. And it's not like Dallas's power play hasn't been a pretty big advantage too. So I mean, in the last round, their power play ended up being way stronger than Colorado's. So there's every chance that their penalty kill could start to look pretty, stalwart against Edmonton, and suddenly they're sawing off at the power play, and Dallas is the way better team at 5-on-5.
Yeah. This is actually a pretty good one here. And this is more of an Edmonton question, so we don't have the insight on this, but it's an interesting concept of how quick is the hook on Skinner in this series? Because he's a guy, like, remember, Skinner was, they hooked him after game. They went to him when the series was. They went to him for game 5.
Game 5, I think, right? They went to Pickard.
He went to Pickard in game 5, and he won game 5. No, sorry. They went to him in game 4. Pickard played 4 and 5, and then Skinner played 6 and 7.
Came back for 6 and 7.
So it's an interesting dynamic. Skinner has made a couple. He's made some saves in game 6 and 7 when Edmonton needed him to. But the other key here is, like, I went and pulled if anyone hasn't looked, go look at my story on my site today. He lets up goals from areas where NHL goalies are not supposed to let up goals from. And for a guy who's 6'4", he's very Kerry Lehtinen-like in how he gets just beaten high.
Think about this. How different will this series be, or would Colorado have been, if in game 1 when Dallas goes up 4-0 or 3-0 and then blows the lead? How different would it have been if that happens in this series against Edmonton? If they go up 3-0, you think Skinner's staying in for the rest of the game? Do you think he's starting game 2?
No,
that could change the whole series if Dallas has a first period in game 1 like they did against Colorado.
Yeah. I mean, to me, the biggest thing here is with
Listen closely as a master painter carefully brushes Benjamin Moore Regal Select down the seam of the wall. It's like poetry in motion. Benjamin Moore, see the love.
This episode is brought to you by CarMax. CarMax is putting peace of mind back in car shopping by putting you in the driver's seat to find a ride that's right for you. Because CarMax believes you shouldn't just settle for a car. You should love your car. That's why every car they sell has CarMax certified quality, so you can be sure, with upfront pricing that's the same for every customer. So don't settle. Find love at first drive. CarMax, the way car buying should be. Start shopping now at CarMax.com.
Dallas, one of your biggest flaws is you don't start well. This is your opportunity. You have the rest. You have the time to sit and watch. You had time to sit and watch these other two teams battle it out. You've picked and prodded. This to me is the perfect opportunity where, okay, we can start. You can win a game one in front of a live crowd for the first time since 2019. That's the last time Dallas won a game one in front of a live crowd. So I think that's the big thing for, and I think that's the other part with like Edmonton. I think Dallas can win this year. I believe Dallas will. I think you don't want to go down, get into the business of going down 0-2, but Dallas could go down 0-2 in this series, and I think they could still win this series. Mm-hmm. If Edmonton doesn't go back to if Edmonton doesn't have a victory going back to Alberta, I think it could be ugly. Like that's like Edmonton. Like you talk about pressure on the Oilers. The pressure is on Edmonton to me in this, because what Dallas has proven that they do on the road, how they don't really there. So
yeah, well, and Edmonton too. They don't have the proof of concept, right? Their first round, everyone kind of knows, that they actually got a legitimately sort of lower seed opponent in a certain sense, regardless of the number next to them in the standings. Everyone kind of agrees, that first round for Edmonton was not exactly taxing on them. Whereas Dallas has proven a lot of things already. So if Edmonton, they really, this last round was the first time their confidence got shaken, and they won a game 7 by 1 goal, despite Vancouver losing Besser and despite Vancouver being on their third string goalie, all these things that should have gone Edmonton's way, they barely squeaked by. They had to come back and win game 6 and 7. So which of these teams is going to be shaking if they're down 0-2? I would think Edmonton has a lot, like you said, they have a lot at stake in terms of being in this series at all times.
I think the Stars fan is also, and I think it's kind of one of this is me reading the fandom side of it. I think the Stars fan isn't used to this, and I think that's kind of the reason, extra fear that gets allowed to percolate within the fan base of, oh man, this guy comes into town or whatever. Like I think the Stars fan is not used to this. They are used to, they were the plucky team that punched above their weight. A team that in last year were good, but we could clearly see some of the flaws. I think it is it's hard. It's one of those where it's hard sometimes from a fandom perspective to be the scariest person in the room. And that is like when you look around and you don't see the monster, you're the monster. And I think that is the spot that I think Stars fans aren't used to being in that spot. And I think that's why I see some of this like fear within the Stars fan base that like, oh man, this is a tough series. And
that's why everyone, I think, was writing about, getting Chris Stanoff in here, because last run, that was obviously what Dallas needed. Haskin was getting worn down, playing too much, and Hakanpää and Lindell were getting a little exposed, and everyone was talking about Suter, regardless of whether he had a good series or not in any given moment. They were always talking about him because that was obviously an area Dallas needed. Back in 2020, right? Goaltending, they're on their backup and all this other stuff. And then in 2019, they had one line that could score. So finally, all those boxes are actually checked, and everyone's looking around. Okay, but what's the problem this time? There's got to be. We've taken care of all those things finally, but there's got to be another problem somewhere, right? But maybe the monster's not under the bed anymore.
Yeah. And you have. You also, I think the other thing about this series, and I don't. Pete DeBoer to me has proven, and I want to be clear, like at the beginning, I was like, okay, Pete DeBoer, I didn't give him enough credit when he originally got hired. I thought it was a so-so hire when he got hired at first, but I have kind of come around and looked at it. He's a very good coach. He understands his teams. He understands his strengths. this Stars team better reflects how he wants to play. Sometimes it takes a couple years for a GM to build the roster his coach needs, which is actually one kind of funny things with all the coaching changes, right? Where it's, and you look at the coaching perspective here, where other than telling the bottom six to play hard defensively and just basically throwing a puck out for top two players, what has Knobloch done other than really give them the new coach bump? And, well, we can't fire everyone, so we have to fire the coach. That's and it's, to me, that is I have a hard time giving Knobloch a ton of credit. Like, it's, I kind of laughed because, like, so the Jack Adams Award actually came out tonight as we're recording, right? Rick Tocchet wins it. This is fine, deserving, whatever you want to call it. I mean, the fact that Knobloch ranks 5th on that and DeBoer ranks 10th on the thing, you really think Knobloch did a better... I mean, he took over a team that they had a winning streak. Great. And they looked like world beaters at that time. But I don't really think any of that's coaching. They run a very similar... Their system didn't change much. Their style didn't change much. Nope. So I just think it's another...
He didn't even go out. Yeah, he didn't even go out and say we need these players and like change the team in any way or bring guys up in any significant fashion. Really, it's even the same guys playing the same way.
It's a big series. It boils down to, at the end of the day, it's a big series of narratives versus facts for me. The Oilers are the narrative. The Oilers are they represent potential Cup champion from Canada for the first time. They bring in Paul Coffey, Hall of Fame defenseman, to be an assistant coach. McDavid, and great. If this is the NBA, the narrative might win out. One player can be that impactful. Mm-hmm. I don't see how it happens. Now, of course, if Dallas loses the series, someone will use this entire podcast episode, and all my credibility will be gone forever. So I thank you for everyone who's read so far, and you can put this in my sports rating obituary at some point if needed. But I feel pretty confident that feel pretty confident that we're looking at is the real question right now to come out of this series, and it's going to sound really egotistical on a Stars podcast, but I really believe it is. The real question is Game 1 in New York or is it in Dallas? That's really the question. That's really the biggest question, and it's getting determined in the other series. Yep.
There's look, anything can happen. Like you said, it's the NHL. It's very random, and from game to game, and even in a 7-game series, there's lots of ways things can go. But man, there's so many more ways things can go Dallas's way than Edmonton's. And aren't we always, until the game starts, it's a preview for a reason. You're talking about what's more likely to happen. And there's really no reason to say that it's more likely for Edmonton to win unless you really believe every single die they roll is going to come up their way for most of this series. And I just don't see it at this point.
It's the best team doesn't always win a 7-game series. That's true. That's always the case. But this is not, but I think the 7-game series is, I think this sample size, it's hard for me to see a large enough sample size where, to me, there's enough room for error for Dallas where it's so easy to get over, not easy, but there's enough room for error where any hurdles that come up, I see how Dallas gets over them, how they move past them. And that's a good team. So.
Yep. Yeah, and usually, when you look at underdogs that have kind of gotten to a Stanley Cup final, against the odds or without these things, usually they have one thing in common, and that's fantastic goaltending that carries them through a tough series that they otherwise maybe shouldn't win. And I do not see that in Edmonton's camp by a long shot. So you'd be hard pressed to really even have a historical precedent for a team like this beating a team like Dallas based on what they've done in the playoffs so far, just based on the last 14. Well, not quite 14 games.
Yeah. Well, it's I picked Dallas in 5 in this series, and that's kind of how I picked Dallas in 5 in this series. Mainly because I think Edmonton at some point I think there will be a game that you get. It's hard to beat a team 4 times in a row. I think that's the reality. So I picked Dallas in 5, but unless something completely changes for two teams, like it's not just Dallas faltering, it's also Edmonton having to do something completely different. I don't see it happening, and that's kind of the way I see it. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And let's not forget that Edmonton, Dallas has had almost a full week to rest. And regardless of who's actually going to be in the lineup or not, that's also good for the guys who have been in, right? There's no way Tanev wasn't feeling it after that Colorado series, regardless of the fact that he played all those minutes. So Dallas getting to actually rest and recover, whereas Edmonton gets, 2 days off? If you can call it days off, since one of them is a travel day over the border. I mean, Dallas has a lot going for them even before you get to the players on the ice.
Yeah. I mean, if you're, to me, one of the big rest points too is going to be you get a chance to, I think one of the most important conversations that happens between Game 6 against Colorado and Game 1 that's happened, and it's not an in-depth conversation because you don't have the time to really tweak things. It's at some point there's been a sit down between Jake Ottinger and Jeff Reese. At some point, because when you went from round 1 to round 2, there was no time. It was 48 hours. You don't have any time to do anything. It's this one, and they're not tweaking style. They're not tweaking anything like that. But there is a conversation. There's been a conversation at some point in the past 5 days where Jake Ottinger and Jeff Reese have both been like, okay, how do we make sure we take Game 1? And to me, I think that's a thing where, like, I would not be surprised if you see best version of Jake Ottinger right out of the gate after we know he's a guy who lives off proving people wrong. And right now, people know that Jake Ottinger struggles in Game 1s. That's just what happened. That's happened. And I think there's an opportunity here for him on that too. So.
Yep. And look, if they hadn't dropped, not that you can play revisionist history, but if they hadn't dropped Game 1 against Vegas, that series is over in what, five games? And if they hadn't dropped Game 1 against Colorado, that series is also over in 5 games. So if you fix that issue, everything else follows along. And by the way, I'm sure everyone's aware of it at this point, since Ottinger's slow start in both those series, but he's the best goalie in the playoffs right now. Just looking at the data, his save percentage is tops right now through 2 rounds. And I feel like that's somehow gotten undersold a little bit because everyone wants to talk about Brovsky or Shesterkin or whoever. But Dallas has everything going for them right now when you talk about, even before you talk about fixing Game 1s. And if you do that, then, I mean, if Edmonton makes it to 5 games, maybe they're lucky at that point. But it's hockey, so no one's going to actually say that out loud in a podcast. That'd be foolish.
Yes, it'd be foolish to have it'd be foolish to say the opinions to actually share your opinion without hedging, and so.
No, that'd ruin my political career 10 years from now. I can't do that.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you for listening. Thank you, Robert, for coming on. Go read Robert's work. He does tremendous stuff. It's great. Gavin I believe Gavin will be back Thursday for the post-game show. I should be on with him for that. I believe that is the plan. And this is, it should be fun. As I like to tell Gavin after wins, when each time in the playoffs, each time you win a game, you've locked in another opportunity to do to have some more fun. So that's it for us. I'm signing off. I'm not the chiseled perfect radio host on this, but hopefully you enjoyed the show. So thank you.